Dickerson, look, we know he's the future, but for this potential, let's get him a couple weeks of practice, full practice. Let's slow him down a little bit. We saw what Nate Herbig could do. You don't think that's even going to be on the table for the Eagles this Monday night?
Nah, I mean, I don't think so. They went with Landon Dickerson in practice when Brooks was missing time last week. And like I said, if they were going to go with Herbig, the time to do it would have been in that game.
Mac and Mac guys on Birds 365. It's Dallas week. Is it something we should be getting excited about? Is it something we can get excited about? As I said in the opening segment, the rivalry is kind of historical more than it is current. We'll see if I'm understating it or not. With our next guest, he does a great job covering the Birds day in and day out for NBC Sports Philly. Dave Zangaro joins us here on Birds 365. How are you, Dave?
I'm good, guys. How are you?
Doing well, Dave. Good to see you. I see Dave all the time, though. But, it's been a couple of days, so it's exciting. And we'll get back to work on Thursday. A little bit of a weird week. But I guess I want to start with the quarterback, Dave, because it's so interesting. The numbers are great. I mean, the passer rating, the completion percentage, no turnovers, leads the team in rushing. The Eagles are number 2 in the NFL in rushing. All of these things look phenomenal. Pro Football Focus, if you want to go for the advanced stuff, has Jalen Hurts, I think, number 2. Then I look at those pass charts from Next Gen Stats. They look like they're sponsored by Dunkin' Donuts. There's a big hole in the middle of the field. My question to you, Dave, is Nick Sirianni protecting Jalen Hurts? And if he is that what the Eagles really want? Because isn't this season about finding out what you have in Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, it's interesting. And you're right. I mean, those charts are pretty shocking. Everything outside the hash marks, really. And you can find reasons in the individual games. And Sirianni kind of talked about it a little bit, saying it was matchup driven. And you can see a little bit of that, I guess, if you look, especially in last week's game against the 49ers, when you have Fred Warner in the middle of the field, it's probably wise to avoid it a little bit. Maybe not to that extent, not throw anything in the middle of the field. Look, the one thing I want to see with Jalen Hurts is I want to see him throw with anticipation and lead his receivers, and a lot of that stuff is in the middle of the field. So whether it's hitting a guy up the seam or it's a crosser, I want to see some of it. And I think we're going to have to eventually, because other NFL teams see those charts too, and they're going to start taking it away. In the 49ers game, it made sense because you have Fred Warner in the middle of the field. You have banged up cornerbacks on the outside. So I'd probably try to attack those spots too. It can't continue like that because defenses see it and they're going to start clamping down. So the next step is going to be, he's going to have to throw in the middle of the field at times. But look, I don't want to take away from what he's done so far. He's had a pretty decent start to this season. There were a few missed throws for sure in the last game. And if he hits one of those deep balls, it might be a different game. So you can look at it one of two ways. You can say, he missed a couple of deep balls and it happens. Or you can say one of those deep balls, if he hits it, especially the Devontae Smith one, he throws that a second earlier. That's a touchdown. That game might flip. So there's been encouraging signs from Jalen Hurts. We need to see more.
Dave, John just conjectured that it's play calling. It's the decision on the coaching staff, what is or isn't the priority on every step of the game, and they are making a decision to not use the middle of the field, which is probably accurate. But let me give you a second possibility that Eagle fans aren't going to want to hear, but middle of the field a lot of times is tight end territory. And Eagles have two guys who have proven in their NFL career that they can get open, they can make the catch, they can get positive yardage in both Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. between the two of them, 3 catches last week with no breakaway catches, no game-breaking type catches. And over the course of the first 2 games, neither one of them has really stood out. Is it the fact that the Eagles are not looking to get the ball to the tight ends, or the tight ends not getting open the way that they have in years gone by?
I don't know if it's a second option. I don't know if there's anything that's happened. You can say that maybe Zach Ertz, you can look at last year and say, well, maybe he's not the same player. But Dallas Goedert, I mean, he's going to get open. So I think it's just a matter of figuring out the game plan and game planning for those 2 players. We've seen them in some 12 personnel. They're going to be forced into it. We've joked about that before, that, yeah, of course they're going to have to be in 12 because they have 2 really good tight ends. Yeah, it's the numbers are a little troubling, especially in the last game. You look at it and you go, man, it was almost like they weren't on the field. But I'm not too worried about the production, for at least for Dallas Goedert. If you want to look at it for Zach Ertz and wonder, like, has he lost a step? Is he the same player? That's fair. I based on last season. But with Dallas Goedert, I'm pretty convinced his production is going to come.
Yeah, Dave, Nick always talks about this fine line between off-schedule offense and throwing and getting the football out on time. There was one example with Dallas Goedert in the flat where they were sort of rolling Jalen Hurts out. The high-low really was a low-high read. Could have gotten the football out on time to Dallas Goedert. Probably would have been about a 10-yard gain. For whatever reason, he held on to it, tried to get the football down the field to Devontae Smith, who didn't win on his route. Is that the stuff Nick is talking about? Like, that you have to get out on time. Doug Peterson would used to call it, let the offense work for you, as opposed to always shooting for the big play, whether it's with the legs or trying to get the football down the field.
Yeah, and that's a good. That was 3rd down too, right? I believe so. That moves the chains, and you got to take the easy throw there. And I think you're right. I think he hesitated, and then that kind of sealed it up, and then he had to throw deep, and the hesitation can't be there from Hurts. That was the problem on a couple of those deep balls too. You got to get the ball out of your hand. You got to, like I said, you got to throw with anticipation. You have to be ready to make those plays. For the most part, though, I think he has done a fairly decent job of playing within himself and not always shooting for the big play. That was obviously a big problem with this team last year and another quarterback. So when you compare the two, I think Hurts has done a pretty good job of giving what the defense, or taking what the defense gives him. There have been a few examples where he'll leave the pocket too early. And look, I don't know if that ever goes away completely. I don't know if any quarterback with his set of skills figures out the perfect science of when to stay in the pocket and when to escape. It's just about doing it the best you can consistently. But there have been times where he's left the pocket too early and he's taken off too early. And then there have been other times where I've been impressed with how long he waits to run because he's looking downfield. And I think that's what you want. You want him to be pass first, and then the safety valve is always there. And he's taken it a few times, but for the most part, he's looked down the field to throw, and that's a good sign from my perspective.
And I went back and double-checked it yesterday. The 9 running plays that he had, only 1 out of the 9 could I actually say, well, he could have given it one more beat. Take one more second. Give the guy another couple of strides to get open. I thought he was very judicious with how he handled his running in the last game. All right, Dave, you're good to answer this question. Much like John, we try and get Eagle Beat guys on. Brandon Graham being out of the lineup, done for the season. To a man, every player says it. You guys are around it, so you know. How difficult is it going to be to replace Brandon Graham, the leader, as much as Brandon Graham, the football player, who's even capable of doing something like that for the Philadelphia Eagles?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough loss, and you watch it happen, and Brandon hasn't missed time really in forever. It seems like he's always healthy. So it's an initial shock, and you're right. As the leadership standpoint of it is going to be tough to not have him out there because he brings some energy, just natural energy. It's not forced. He's always got it with him. And look, they're not gonna replace that necessarily. I think when Rodney comes back, that'll help a little bit there because Rodney is a high energy guy and he can lead the pregame huddles and the post game. He can do all that stuff and that'll help. And Brandon's going to be around in the building. That'll help as well. But we talk so much about Graham's leadership. I really don't want us to lose sight of the fact that he's their best edge player. And, we can talk about them replacing the leadership. They got to figure out a way to replace him on the field. Because this is a guy who's 33 and he's playing the best football of his life. And behind him now, they have to figure out what they're going to do because you're going to have either Josh Sweat or Derek Barnett starting on the right side of the defensive line. Who starts on the left side in Graham's spot? Is it they bump Ryan Kerrigan up? I wouldn't do that. I think you have to kind of limit his snaps, make him a rotational guy. So that means you're probably moving either Barnett or Sweat from the right side of the line to the left. That's something they have to figure out in practice this week. And then they had depth there, but they were using all their depth, right? They were rotating 4 deep. Now, is Teron Jackson the next guy up? Is he ready for a real role? Or do you say Milton Williams, guess what? Now you're going to bump outside more. So there are a lot of questions. I think there are more questions of how they're going to fill him or replace him on the field than there are off the field.
Yeah. Do you think, Dave, Milton Williams is interesting? Because the Eagles kind of behind the scenes brought up, he's got like a Brandon Graham type body. They thought maybe he could be that type of player. Play inside, maybe go back, play outside, maybe go back inside in pass rushing situations, have some versatility. Does that speed up Milton Williams' importance to this defense? Does he have to get some reps at left end?
Yeah, he probably does a little bit. I'll be honest with you. I still think his best spot is inside. I like what he can do from an interior pass rush position because I think he has the ability and the athleticism to really beat guards in this league, but he does have the power to beat some tackles, and I think we'll see that. He's an interesting guy. I was really surprised that really in training camp, I would say, gosh, like 70% end?
Yeah.
He was at. So, and that's just off the top of my head. I was surprised how much defensive end he played for this team in training camp to the point where I was wondering if we're going to see him inside at all. And then the season starts and he's mostly inside. So he has those reps under his belt. And if Teron Jackson isn't ready to really contribute more than, let's be honest, probably a handful of pass rush only snaps, then yeah, I think we're going to have to see Milton outside a little bit.
Dave, it was a costly week for the Eagles on a couple of fronts. Number one, they lost the game. Number two, they lost Brandon Graham. Number three, they lost Brandon Brooks. And his replacement is sitting right there to be plugged in like he was last week. Corey Dickerson, the Eagles reached out, took him in the second round. Some people thought he would be a first-round talent if he had not been hurt. He's back from injury. He didn't get training camp in. They threw him into the deep end of the pool this week when Brooks went out. And he did not grade out well. Kind of got pushed around in his first NFL start. Does one even long week because they don't play till Monday night going to be able to make the difference that he's going to be able to get up to speed and not be a deterrent filling in for Brooks this week?
Yeah, look, you're replacing Brandon Brooks, who's one of the best guards in the league when healthy, so it's not an easy task. And Landon Dickerson, you're right, he didn't have a very good debut. It was rough, but honestly, I went back and watched, and it wasn't as bad as I thought from first watch. Sure, he gave up some ground in pass rush situations, but there were some. When Nick Sirianni said he was encouraged, I kind of tilted my head a little bit, but I went back and watched, and I see what he was saying. There was some good, and he's just so athletic, and I think that with a week of practice, he'll be much better in that spot, especially a week of practice next to Lane Johnson, next to Jason Kelsey. You have to remember, too, he's missed a lot of time. He hasn't played real game action since the SEC championship game. He missed all of training camp. He's been in practice now for a couple weeks. So I don't think it's necessarily shocking that he struggled a little bit in his NFL debut. Nick Sirianni said they're leaving it open. I couldn't imagine them going with Nate Herbig. If there was ever a spot to go with Nate Herbig, it would have been in that game when you could have cited all those reasons I said. But now that you have a full week of preparation and you know that Brandon Brooks is out, yeah, this is going to be fun to watch how Landon Dickerson responds. And however long Brooks is out, it's almost like a trial run for Dickerson because they haven't really committed on a position for him yet. He can play center. He that was his first reps when he got back to practice. He was snapping the ball, and he can play guard. He probably has more of the body build of a guard. So over the next month or so, let's see how he does at the guard position, and it might give us a hint of where they want to play him in the future.
Yeah, that was my question, Dave, because Landon's first full practice was last week. I mean, that was the first time he practiced in full, and all of a sudden the worst case scenario happens for the Eagles. He's got to be thrown into the deep end of the pool. As you mentioned, he tore his ACL, I think it was December 19th. So we're right at that 9-month period. Probably would have been the more prudent way in that game to go with Nate Herbig. So with a week to think about it, Jeff Stoutland, you don't think there's any chance they slow things down to Landon Dickerson? Look, we know he's the future, but for this potential, let's get him a couple weeks of practice, full practice. Let's slow him down a little bit. We saw what Nate Herbig could do. You don't think that's even going to be on the table for the Eagles this Monday night?
Nah, I mean, I don't think so. They went with Landon Dickerson in practice when Brooks was missing time last week. And like I said, if they were going to go with Herbig, the time to do it would have been in that game. I think the way they're viewing it from a few different lenses. One, I think it's probably fair to say Dickerson, even though he's raw and he doesn't have the experience, is probably just a better player than Nate Herbig. And that's not a shot at Herbig. I mean, he is what he is, and he's worked really hard to improve, but Dickerson's better, right? He better be better. And the other part is that this season is all about development, and it's all about, trying to win now, of course, but developing for the future. So I just can't see them missing this opportunity to get Dickerson valuable playing time, not just for him, but for the team to evaluate him. So, I'd be pretty shocked if Herbig's out there.
Dave, I'm going to make you reach into your magic bag of tricks for your sources. And if not, I'm going to ask you to lend an opinion. John just stated, he said it with me before you came on, said it again since you joined us. Eagles second in the National Football League in rushing after 2 weeks. They trailed the Baltimore Ravens. So what's the common denominator there? A quarterback who can run. You want to lead the league in rushing? Get yourself a Lamar Jackson or a Jalen Hurts. You lead the league in rushing. However, we found out after the fact when the Super Bowl winning coach was let go that he used to have to be called into meetings with the owner after the fact. And the oftentimes conversation was, why don't we throw the football more? How are we not throwing the football more? The NFL's all about throwing the football. Doug, what are you calling? Has the new coach had that conversation yet 2 games in? Because they're running the football effectively, but if you're running it, you're not throwing it. And at least reportedly, the owner likes to throw the ball all over the lot. How do you think Nick Sirianni's conferences are going, gatherings are going with his bosses these days?
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend to know that, but what I do know is that Jeff Lurie likes to be on the cutting edge of the NFL, right? That's his thing, is he wants to be not just in the wave of the trend, he wants to be ahead of it. So, yeah, that's the way the league has gone. It's a passing league. I think there's probably a little grace period for a head coach in his first 2 games with the owner, at least. I think Jeff probably prefers to pass more, but a lot of those rushing stats are because the quarterback takes off, and those are pass plays that are called. I think that Jeff probably has to have an understanding here that this is the offense they're going to run with Jalen Hurts, right? Miles Sanders alluded to it after the win a couple weeks ago, that every play is a run. Not necessarily, but there are options on these plays, and that's the way this is designed. We're going to see a lot of, plays that can be checked to runs, and we're going to see it. If they want Jalen Hurts to play to his max potential, I think this is the type of offense you're going to need. And if Lurie doesn't understand that, then they're going to have to get a new quarterback. It's kind of the deal with Jalen Hurts and what he can do. And if it's going to be an option heavy offense, if it's going to be an RPO heavy offense, which at times it's going to need to be, then they're going to run the ball. It's the only way to do it.
Well, I didn't want to get here, but we got here, Dave, and it's only 2 weeks, and I think it's incredibly unfair. But you bring up a good point in the fact that if the Eagles want Jalen Hurts to succeed, they have to build this offense a certain way, and Jeffrey Lurie likely doesn't want to build the offense that certain way. As you mentioned, he likes to be on the cutting edge of the NFL. He talks about a high-powered passing game. You have to have it. I talked about this a lot in the offseason. I probably asked you this question in the offseason. Is there anything Jalen Hurts can do to win over Jeffrey Lurie? Or does he want a completely different type of offense, different type of quarterback who can sling the football all over the place?
Yeah, I will say that as much as we know Jeffrey likes to throw the football, the Eagles did bring in Rich Scangarello last year. If we're looking for hints about the way the franchise might view offense, and that's not necessarily a hire that goes with chucking the ball all over the yard, right?
Play action, Kyle Shanahan, yeah.
Yeah, so thank you. So there's a little bit of I think there's some of that, but if they prove that, if Sirianni has a chance to prove that this offense can win and Hurts can be a top 10, 12 quarterback in the league with this offense, it's going to make the decision a lot tougher. And maybe ultimately it's always in the back of Jeffrey's mind that this isn't exactly what I want, but winning solves a lot of problems.
That's true.
If it looks like this can work long term, and that's the key. And we talk so much about this, that this is the year to find out what Jalen Hurts is and if he's the future. And I actually want to get your guys' take on this, because I'm of the belief that there's no guarantee they know at the end of this year. And I've talked to some people who think that they're going to know one way or the other. It's going to be like either he is the guy or he's not the guy. I think there's a real chance, and the first 2 weeks of the season are kind of showing this to me, that they might end up in this weird middle ground where they're going to have a really tough decision to make.
Yeah.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you that that's a possibility. But here's what they'll talk themselves into it one way or the other. Dave Zangaro, Jody McDonald, John McMullen might not agree that it's clear cut. Oh, the Eagles will talk themselves into the fact that it's clear cut, that he's the man or he's not the guy. We have to go another direction. They won't find themselves in the middle. Maybe they should, but they won't. They'll make a definitive call on that. I can guarantee you that. All right, Dave, it is Cowboy week. They got Dallas coming up on Monday night. Is there added pressure to this game, the level of the rivalry aside, because they play the Cowboys here and then they don't play a divisional rival again for 3 months? It's either till the end of the season. 5 of their last 6 games are in division games, which of course are the most important. You've got this one kind of standalone division game early against Dallas. Does that add to the pressure of the Cowboy-Eagle matchup?
Yeah, I mean, it's a division game, and it is Monday Night Football, and that might not mean a lot for the veterans, but if you're a young player, you play in your first primetime game, that there is a little added to it. It means more, and it means more for the Eagles coming off a game where they really should have won, and the tough part of the schedule's coming up. I know that they're laser focused, they're 1 week at a time, but they know the games coming are pretty tough. You have some really good teams in the next month or so. So this is a winnable game in Dallas. It's a tough game. Don't get me wrong. It's tough to go down there and win. But, yeah, I think there is added pressure to this game. I don't think there's any way around it.
Dave, last one from me, and make sure you read Dave's work at NBC Sports Philadelphia. Does a tremendous job covering this team on a daily basis. You mentioned a couple times, and I agree with you, this season should be about the Eagles finding out what they have in certain players, most notably Jalen Hurts, but you mentioned Landon Dickerson as well. We heard that phrase transition from Jeffrey Lurie. My question to you is, does Nick Sirianni know that? I mean, there's sort of this disconnect. Every head coach in this league, what's Nick Sirianni's job? To win Monday in Dallas. How do you serve those two masters?
Yeah, it's inherent for head coaches to just they have to try to win the game. So yeah, there's a little bit of that battle, but the good news here is that there aren't many natural battles there between. So, like, there's no. If you want to say Nate Herbig should start because but you could say Landon Dickerson's a better player, or your developmental quarterback is the starter. So it's not like there aren't many natural battles there where you have to.
Well, I guess I would go back to masking the deficiencies of the quarterback. Is that is it more important to scheme up Jalen Hurts from where we started, keeping him away from the middle of the field as an example, or is it more important to figure out what you have in the quarterback, and how do you serve those two masters as the head coach?
Yeah, if you're the head coach, you got to scheme it up to try to win the game. So if that means masking deficiencies, or they wouldn't put it that way, they'd put utilizing his strengths, right? That's how they would say the same thing. But yeah, I mean, head coach has to try to win the game, and he has to try to help the quarterback in whatever way he can. And then but then the scouting side of it, when they do look back at this, they have to be realistic about it and see what they saw. But look, they can't go a whole season without throwing in the middle of the field. So I think a lot of these problems that we're talking about now aren't going to be problems in 2 months. So they can't go a whole season without throwing in the middle of the field. So eventually we're going to find out if Hurts can complete those passes. And I don't think it'll be too big of an issue.
You also want to check out the Eagle Eye podcast on NBC Sports Philadelphia for great analysis, great opinion, and at times great hairstyles from Ruben Frank. That's why I tune in more than anything else to see what Ruben's hair is going to look like. As you can see here between me, Dave, and John, there's not much choice. Ruben, it still does fluctuate from podcast to podcast. All right, last thing, Dave. Who did the Eagles have to stop on the ground here? We were talking about Jalen Hurts' ability to make plays. That can take off, but he's not going to do that with the injuries he's had. He's going to either throw the ball away or he's going to get out on time. No, I'm talking about their two running backs, Tony Pollard, who I watched that Cowboy game after the Eagle game was over the other day, made some big plays. They got Ezekiel Elliott, who's more reputation than he actually is production. Who's the guy who the Eagles are going to have to stop on Sunday carrying the football for Dallas?
Pollard's been their better running back for a while now, honestly. It's I still think Zeke has talent. I just don't know how much he has left. They've really run him into the ground down there. And, Pollard's a better player right now. He just is. And it might seem shocking. And that's not to say Zeke can't do some good things still. And he still has the ability out of the backfield and all that, but this is what we see with running backs in this league. They take a huge workload in their first few years, and then they're never the same. And we've seen the decline from Zeke. Getting to watch him 2 times a year, and even from watching him from afar, it's been precipitous. And he's not the same player he once was.
That's why what Derrick Henry is doing in Tennessee is remarkable, because he doesn't drop off. He just continues to put up 150, 170-yard games year after year after year after year. Dave, great stuff. We appreciate it greatly whenever you come on, specifically this morning. Thanks, pal.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
That is Dave Zangaro from NBC Sports Philadelphia. Do check out the Eagle Eye podcast on NBC Sports Philly as well. All right, John McMullen, Jody McDonald. We are known as Mac and Mac. We're known as Birds 365. We're right back at you in just a